Something I want to get into right now with our next guest is low oil prices will crush Texas economy. Here's what the state must do in response. Joining us on 710 KURV is Chrysta Castaneda. She's a candidate for Railroad Commission, a Democrat asking for your vote. Chrysta, thank you for joining us again. We really appreciate it. So in your headline, when you talk about here's what the state must do in response, what do you mean? What should the state do?
So the Texas Railroad Commission has nothing to do with railroads. It has everything to do with oil and gas, and it has the power and has had it for 100 years to protect our natural resources, the oil and gas that is extracted, and to protect the environment and all Texans by limiting production. That's what needs to happen because the market is terribly oversupplied right now.
Do you know why some of these oil companies are choosing to not limit their production? And I remember reading last time that they're kind of now wanting to pay us. Is that it's cheaper for them to keep production going and to pay people to buy it instead of just stopping or slowing production?
Well, sure. So the reason that oil companies want to keep producing is because some of them desperately need to keep the cash flowing. They're barely ahead of their lenders in terms of the way they run their businesses, so they need that money coming in the door so that they can repay their lenders. It's a broken model for a lot of these companies, but it's harming all of Texas by the overproduction that's happening. Pretty soon, we're going to run out of any storage whatsoever. We're going to be shutting in all kinds of production, which is not going to be easy to restart. It's a little bit like restarting up the economy once we get rid of the COVID-19 threat.
What kind of procedure are we talking about?
Sorry,
Hello?
didn't hear that?
Sorry, what kind of procedures are we talking about when it comes to that?
Yeah, so what they're doing is they're holding a hearing tomorrow, and they've been holding hearings for a couple of weeks. It's called a proration hearing, and what they do is they're supposed to take a look at where the oil is being produced and where it's possible to shut it in, and a whole bunch of engineering and environmental factors and geology and market dynamics. There's a lot to be considered.
Can the Railroad Commission, I'm sorry, David, just one more question. Can the Railroad Commission, I wouldn't say force, but I guess force or make these oil companies slow their production?
Yes, it can. It has had this power for over 100 years. It's one of our strongest agencies in the state of Texas. And again, its vital mission is to make sure that we're not wasting oil and gas production and that we're protecting the environment.
Joining us on 710 KURV is Chrysta Castaneda. She's a candidate for Railroad Commission, talking about how low oil prices will crush Texas economy. She wrote an op-ed on the Star Telegram saying that this is what the state must do in response. Go ahead, Davey. I'm sorry.
Yeah, this is Davis Rankin. I just wanted to make sure I understand, or the listeners understand, the ability for the three elected people to tell ExxonMobil or any other petroleum giant that no, you cannot drill and you cannot pump more than X amount on your field in West Texas. That's the power that they have and have had forever. I remember when they used to set the rate, the price, and we would put it on the radio. When did they quit doing that and just allow people to drill and pump as much as they wanted?
Yeah, that's a great question. So up until the 1970s and early 1980s, they did this on a regular basis. They would limit the production from certain fields based on, whatever the market dynamics were and whatever the threat of waste was. Now, since the early 2000s, they haven't even practiced doing it. So it's a little bit like preparing for an emergency. Y'all probably have sirens down there that get tested once a month to warn of tornadoes or whatever. Well, they stopped doing all the preparedness, and so now they don't even know how to do it anymore. It's been a couple of decades, and when we need it, the machinery is no longer running.
You point toward indebtedness that needs to be serviced or paid if oil companies are going to stay in business. Is how much of this is public information? And then is it just somebody told me that the big boys want to drive the loaned up, the cash strapped businesses, oil companies out of business, so they have to sell to the giants. Now that's a very crude way to put it. I'm not. Where does that fit in, or does it?
So great questions again. The amount of indebtedness that any one company is carrying at any time is not necessarily a matter that we can know as the public. If the company's publicly traded, we're entitled to know, but many of these oil companies are privately held by private equity and whatnot. Then as far as the big trying to drive the littles out of business, I've also heard that rumor, but what I've also heard is that the bigs are hoping to, supply. They own. They're integrated. They own pipelines. They own, the wells, and they can manage all by their lonesome. And so that's why they feel like they don't need the Railroad Commission, whereas others do. So it gives them a competitive advantage.
Was the Railroad Commission supposed to be like a monopoly in that they would regulate the market for maximum profit? Were they supposed to regulate the drilling so that the oil guys didn't screw up the wells by operating them badly? What was the reason for it? It started off with hostility to the railroads, I assume.
It did. That was like 130 years ago. There was a demand for the railroads to transport grain and other products equitably across the state. So that's how the commission got named. So what the Railroad Commission is required to look at is all of these regulations are supposed to have their footing in whether there is a physical waste of the oil and gas that's being produced, as there is when we overproduce it. But in recent decades, the law has eased up a bit to allow them to also consider things like the economic costs that are involved. But it's a complicated process, it's a complicated business, and at base, what I'm telling people is that the Railroad Commission needs to do their job and take all these things into account.
Now, here's an unfair question for you. The fellow I assume were figuring you'd run against, Ryan Sitton, got whooped in the Republican primary. Did you anticipate this oil field guy? You did? You thought the guy in Robstown was going to win?
No. He did.
But he did get whooped, is what she's agreeing to, Davis.
Okay. All right, I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
I did not see that coming.
Do you all walk hand in hand ideologically, or I told you it was an unfair question, or where do y'all stand?
Well, here's the interesting thing. He and I are both engineers, and we both tend to approach this particular problem as engineers. He's in favor of production controls or proration. I'm in favor of production controls or proration. I doubt that we'd be deploying them the same way to come up with the same answer, but I think both of us are interested in trying to solve the problem. Now, ideologically, he is a pretty far-right Republican, as I understand it, and I am a Democrat.
Miss Castaneda, if you're going to say far-right Republican, you got to say far-left Democrat. It's just fair. I'm joking.
One thing I wanted to again ask you, which is the reason why we also had you on the show, is that so tomorrow on Tuesday, that's when Texas oil regulators vote on the production cut to boost prices. What do you think is going to happen?
I think that they're going to hear from a lot of people, me included. I have signed up to speak, and I think they're going to do nothing. They're going to table it again.
Oh, gosh. Are you going to yell at them? To be hostile and angry? They can live stream it so we can watch?
That's the fascinating thing. So, yes, if you search for Texas Railroad Commission, there will be a live link that the state is requiring every agency to have, because we're entitled to all attend these meetings. And over 20,000 people attended the one on April 14th. It's just fascinating. There's so much interest in this topic.
Why do you think that is?
Lastly, sorry,
okay, go
well,
ahead.
My turn.
Why is
go ahead,
it?
Chrysta.
I was just going to say, why are people so interested? Because as the testimony took place last time, over 300,000 jobs are going to be lost as a result of this. This is 20% of our state revenues. I mean, it's a huge issue, and the Railroad Commission has got to get it correct.
Yeah, that was actually that's something I wanted to bring up, were jobs. Will cutting Texas oil production, will it at least, save some workers, some jobs when it comes to like their job in the oil rigs right now? Because I was mentioning this before, I think we all have someone either we know or know of someone that has a job up there that has either been furloughed or let go. So if they do cut oil production, will jobs be saved?
Yeah, I mean, that's the hope, is that we can smooth out the ups and downs and make it a little bit more steady state and a little bit smoother transition. To me, that's one of the most devastating things about this crisis is the job loss and the loss of opportunities. And as you all know, there are a lot of Latinos who are going to be impacted by these job losses.
Oh yeah. All right. Well, right, Roxanne, we got
to go, Chrysta, but thank you so much for joining us. Wish we had more time with you. You're always welcome on the show. That is Chrysta Castaneda, our guest on 710 KURV. She is running as a Democrat for the Railroad Commission, our guest on 710 KURV.